Now then, to a scandal in the UK that's been all over the newspapers and all over social media at the weekend. So far, unnamed BBC presenter has been accused of paying a 17-year-old for explicit photos. We're going to talk about it in the press review, and Leo has been looking through all the papers for us. How are the papers covering the story, Leo?
As you say, Stuart, this news is absolutely dominating the British press this morning. It's on every single front page. This news, of course, of an unnamed BBC presenter who allegedly paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit photos. I'll start with the tabloids. This is the Star and the Mirror. They have the same lead. They're talking about how the BBC have called in the cops, and officials from the BBC will meet with the Met later on today. You can see from the Daily Mail, they have a similar headline, and they also talk about how the government is now involved because Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser met with BBC bosses yesterday for what she called urgent talks. She says that time and space is now needed for a full investigation to take place. If we look at the broadsheets, you can see that it's the same headlines. We look at the Times here as well as the Telegraph, focusing on police getting involved. It's also reported that the unknown presenter rang the victim twice last week when this story broke to get them to try and drop the story and to simply ask, "What are you doing?"
Leo, a lot of the papers are focusing as well on how the BBC could have handled the case, particularly the role of Director General Tim Davie.
Yeah, if we look inside The Guardian, as you say, they're focusing on BBC Director General Tim Davie. They say this is the biggest crisis in what has been a crisis-strewn tenure so far for Tim Davie. How he deals with this could indeed, it could not only define his future, but the future of the BBC as a whole. He's already faced scandals, of course, with Richard Sharp's loan and his relationship with Boris Johnson at the time, and as well with Gary Lineker and over the whole impartiality row that came about a few months ago. A lot of criticism of this whole thing has come from the fact that the BBC have supposedly known about this since May, but the presenter has remained on air for 6 weeks since then. And the only reason that the victim's mother went to the media was because of what she said was BBC inaction, although top figures didn't know about this until last Thursday. I'll show you this from the Times. They say that this BBC could be facing its toughest week since the Jimmy Savile affair, and that BBC's reputation is just destined to take yet another blow. They say even if this case is investigated thoroughly and professionally, there's no way that the BBC can escape this without their reputation being tarnished somewhat.
Let's cross to West Africa for this next story. Yesterday, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu was elected as head of ECOWAS. That's the Economic Community of West African States. How's that been reported in the region then, Leo?
As you say, Stuart, yesterday, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu was elected as the 35th chairperson of ECOWAS. Among his priorities, Tinubu says that he wants to work for the defence of democracy, in particular by combating unconstitutional changes. Of course, he's referring to a string of coups in West Africa as of late. According to the Punch, which is a Nigerian newspaper, he is committed to helping the so-called transition countries such as Mali, Guinea and Burkina Faso to rapidly return to democratic rule, as he puts it. We will not sit at ECOWAS like a toothless bulldog. That's what he promises. I'll show you this from Lejeli, which is a Guinean site. They say that Bola Tinubu is really presenting himself as a redemptive policeman trying to stop an ECOWAS spiral. They nevertheless question his capacity to keep his promises, especially as potential allies are hard to find, they say. They finish with this quote: "In this West African region, leaders concerned about democracy can be counted on the fingers of one hand."
And we're going to finish today in Colombia. This is a story about hippos. These hippos, though, they're not any old hippo. These are cocaine hippos.
Yeah, so it's not the sequel to Cocaine Bear that you were all thinking. It's something completely different. These hippos aren't actually taking drugs, but there is a genuine worry about these animals taking over the country. As you can see here from Yahoo, they're descendants of 4 hippos that Pablo Escobar kept as pets. They escaped when he died 30 years ago, and their population has expanded. It was 4 at the time. It's over 200 now, and it's come to a point where there's a genuine threat to locals, especially fishermen, because there's no natural predator. Twitter for the hippo. This article poses the interesting question: how do we solve the cocaine hippo problem? They say that the government could try and kill or capture the animals. What they've settled on, though, they say that one option is to administer contraceptives to the hippos. And look, I don't know who gets that job, but I don't know. It seems like a difficult one to me. Not for me. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather stay in the studio and.
Yes, we'd all rather go and jump in the Seine, and the story that we've also been following today here on France 24. Thanks very much, Leo. Leo McGrin there, slightly anxious about those hippos. Don't forget you can catch up with the press review as well, and the accompanying podcast as well on our website. That's at france24.com. So do have a look at that if you possibly can.